Well, to discuss that, I'm joined by two Labour MPs who fall on opposing sides of the Brexit argument. Frank Field was a prominent member of the Leave campaign. Stella Creasy is a supporter of the pro-EU group Open Britain. Thank you both very much for coming on the programme. Stella Creasy, you're one of those who've signed this letter to Jeremy Corbyn today, asking not only to stay in the customs union, but also the single market. If you're in both of them, are you really delivering on the referendum Brexit result?
Well, there are lots of different combinations that still leave us leaving the European Union, but do what I think Labour people across this country, and that's why there's support from across the width and breadth of the country, across the width and breadth of the party for this letter, which is protect the jobs, protects the incomes. You know, we know that Brexit, of any of the models, I'm horrified to hear Ian blithely dismissing the idea that manufacturing might be at stake or that numbers don't matter. It's a massive hit on our economy if we leave the single market, if we leave the customs union. It's a massive hit to peace in Northern Ireland if we leave the customs union. These are core Labour values, and that's what we're standing up for.
But you're asking to stay in the single market as well, and there's a problem with that, which is you fought an election last year and a manifesto that said free movement will end. You can't stay in the single market and end the free movement of people. It's not possible.
Well, I'm actually on the Council of Europe on the Migration Committee. There's lots of people around Europe who are willing to talk about how we make freedom of movement work, because they recognise that actually politicians haven't got it right across the European continent. But if we're not
making it work and there's ending it. The manifesto said it will end.
But if we're not fighting to stay in the single market, we can't have that conversation about what a reformed freedom of movement might look for. And I also have to think that freedom of movement is a very important right for people here in this country. I don't want to have to say to kids in Walthamstow or Birkenhead that actually their ability to work for a company that has a base outside of the UK will be hampered by decisions we've made. That's not a good choice for them. That puts them in an austerity Britain, and I don't want to do that.
Frank Field, does this sound like a Brexit you could sell to any Leave voter?
No, and you know perfectly well we can't sell it. And I'm obviously looking forward to what Jeremy says tomorrow, because you've all hyped it up. But on every vote we've had on Europe before he became leader, Jeremy and I were in the same lobby opposing, deeply suspicious of this organisation, which is corrupt. It's never got its accounts ever audited. It's bankrupt. It actually.
But whatever he says tomorrow, he won't be arguing to stay in the EU. He'll be arguing for the customs union.
No,
you can't say that of the customs union.
Oh no! Please let me finish. It's deeply corrupt. It's bankrupt. It's destabilised Europe with all this pretense about it's brought peace. Look what we've done to the area around Russia, all of that. Now, given there's a number of states within Europe who depend on our contribution, we should actually be voting for a clear declaration. We want a free trade area, and we have money. Now, what are you going to choose? I think we should take the gloves off in these negotiations and look at the real power structure here. They need our money, and for reasons which Stella's put forward, we need access to a free market arrangement.
So what's your problem with Jeremy Corbyn saying that the Labour's policy will be clearly to stay in a customs union?
Well, two things. One, it goes against what we said at the election. It goes against all the scare tactics during the campaign. All the major figures were saying, you know, if you vote here, you're leaving the customs union, you're actually leaving the free market. There was no question about what the referendum was deciding, and the politics of this is, are we going to be run by a London agenda? I know Stella's got huge other issues that she reaches out across the country, but this is essentially a London agenda against Labour voters, particularly in the north, where we found it really hard.
Except that you've got the Mayor of Liverpool who signed this letter, the leader of Newcastle Council. Look, Frank, you and I were in the lobby fighting together against this government's welfare cuts. That's a £12 billion cut. Let me finish, Frank.
That's nothing to do with this.
Because it absolutely is. Because even the bare minimum model that we're talking about would be a bigger hit on our economy, on the communities that we represent. How can we vote for austerity, Frank? That's what you're talking about doing. How can you do that to the voters, the people who work in the Vauxhall plants in the Wirral, who are desperately frightened they're about to lose their jobs? How can we do that to the people in Northern Ireland,
Frank? Let me answer you, please. First of all, we've been through the courts. There is no problem about the Good Friday agreement being challenged by this at all. We've got time. I'm really happy to discuss.
I think there are some significant problems with the Good Friday agreement and the customs union.
No, it will remain, and that will be one of our requirements. But if we've got time, I'd love to discuss that with you. About the austerity, can I actually answer that?
Yes, address that point.
We are actually a net contributor. We will actually have money to actually be brought back. And while one or two people have signed, the odd mayor here and there, if you look at the parliamentary arithmetic, Mrs May almost hollowed out our vote in the north. Some of the seats were only kept by a handful of votes. These are seats which voted very, very clearly to leave. That's the act of faith. And I know there are problems about how do you give the electorate the sovereignty to decide an issue and then bring it back into a representative parliamentary system. But the vote was clear to leave, and the bill is about leaving and whether we support that or not. And if we don't support that, I think Labour voters will draw their own messages
Frank,
in the north.
Please don't drive Boris's bus for the people of this community. You are, because what you're saying is that somehow we'll get money back. All the evidence shows us that any money you might get back will be dwarfed by what we will lose. Let's talk numbers. You're talking about £8 billion coming back. Even the basic of staying in the European Union will stay at £16 billion.
And with all the money
that they... You can talk across me all you like, Frank, but the numbers are there and they're in the government's own analysis. And that's what we have to front up to the communities that we represent about. I'm not going to get on Boris's bike, but I really hope you don't.
Are you going to rat on the people's decision to leave? You're coming up with, you come up, Stella, with all these things. Oh, we'll stay in a customs union. We'll stay in a single market. The decision was quite clear to leave, and there in the north, Labour voters voted very clear. Are you going to rat on them or not? Never mind about buses and all the rest of it.
Well, it does matter, doesn't it? It does matter. It does matter.
Yeah, let's get an answer.
It does matter because it is about the evidence that we now have. Democracy didn't stop the day after the referendum. People have a right to see this detail and ask what their politicians are voting for.
Of course they do.
So do you accept that the government figures show us very clearly that even if we stay in the European Economic Arrangement, which is out of the EU, we're still going to take a £16 billion hit on our economy? That dwarfs anything you might get back. We know that's why this letter is not just signed by people from across the country, but also people from across the trade union movement, because they know what the hard Brexit this government is pushing for and why it matters that Jeremy is out there fighting for the customs union. And yes, that we also fight for single market membership.
What we should be fighting for,
it means jobs and wages.
What we should be fighting for is sector agreements with the European Union. We want a free trade area. They've always actually opposed the activities of the city. There's no need to worry about the city. There is a need to worry about manufacturing, about cars and so on, and we will make special arrangements with them. But the issue is clear. Do we disguise the fact by pretending we've got to have a customs union or some other arrangement which counters what the clear declaration of Northern Labour voters actually said, and there's no evidence they've changed their side.
A third of Labour voters did vote leave. You do risk them abandoning the party with a policy that stays in the customs union and the single market.
This isn't about rerunning the referendum. This is about what kind of deal do we get, and is it in the best interests of Britain? And I believe that voters across this country have the right to know what is likely to happen and what the options are.
There's politics in this as well. There is a danger, isn't there, in a third of Labour voters seeing something that they don't think represents what they voted for.
But of course they have a right to every bit of information going. But the key thing we've had a referendum. We rarely use referendums for this very reason. They're very difficult to implement. The referendum decision was clear, and particularly clear in the north from Labour voters. Are we going to keep faith with them? I want to, because I actually voted to come out. I know it's harder for people who voted to actually stay in. Or are we going to dress up a retreat,
a deceit? There then becomes a complicated decision for you to make. We've been talking about the amendment put forward by Anna Soubry and others, that an amendment to the trade bill that will be voted on in a few months' time. But there's a potential there to defeat the government if Jeremy Corbyn comes out in favour of a customs union and whips his MPs to vote that way. If you had the opportunity to win a vote against the government, to potentially bring down Theresa May, would you vote with her to keep her in office or against her?
That's not the actual choice, and you know
that will be the choice on the day.
We will actually have a decision. Do we continue to implement a referendum decision? I should be voting for that.
Even if that's voting to prop up the government and against the Labour whip?
It's not propping up the government, it's about implementing a decision of the people. And you know perfectly, it's all hype. The government's got a majority on this. The idea that Anna Soubry is going to lead all these people into the Labour lobbies is just fairy tales. But we will see on the night. The government will win comfortably in double figures on this issue.
We'll have to leave it there.